right, well, thank you everybody for coming to the Confidence Catalyst Utah edition. This is our very first time escaping the dreary Pacific Northwest and taking our show on the road. So thank you so much for being here for this pretty monumental occasion for us. The Confidence Catalyst started in 2017 as a Zoom call where it was an environment, a safe place for women who were embarking on new journeys or trying to figure out what they wanted out of life to share their dreams and be encouraged and supported by those in the audience. It was small, but it was very effective. And the following year it went live in Portland to a room full of people just like you guys. And every year after that, it continued annually in Portland, different venues, different speakers, different stories. And then in 2021, I took the stage there right after moving to Portland. So I didn't know anybody, but it was such a great experience. In 2022, they took a hiatus. My business partner, who's not here, but she's the co-creator of this program, had some personal things. So they took the year off, and then we got together in 2023 and said, let's bring this back, but let's make it bigger and better than ever. And that's just what we did. We brought it back with a coaching element. We brought it back with the live streaming element. And after last spring in Portland, I said, hey, let's take this show on the road. I think we're onto something here. And so we did, and here we are. And the reception, as I've been talking to people all over the country, really, for this program is like, we want to know more. Please tell us when you're coming to our city. So I am a Utah native. My name is April Young. I grew up in Delta, down the road, a couple counties over. I went to St. George for college, stayed there for 20 years, and then hightailed it out of here to Oregon about 4 years ago. So it made sense for me to come back to Utah first. So as our very first non-Oregon location, the Great Beehive State, here we are. So thank you again for coming tonight. Yes. To our virtual audience, thank you all as well for joining us. I know a lot of people wanted to be here tonight, but it's Friday. Let's be real. We all have date night or prior commitments and things that prevent us from going certain places. So we have the option for the live stream. So those of us, or those of you that are here live, thank you so much for joining us. Those of you that are on the replay, thank you for supporting our speakers. Even though you couldn't be here in person, we really appreciate your support in purchasing a ticket and listening to their speeches at your convenience. A couple housekeeping items so I don't forget later. We have refreshments in the back, as you all probably know. Feel free at intermission to go get some more because we leave on an airplane tomorrow and we don't want to take any of it with us. Over here by the, what is that, a garage door? The garage door, there is a promo table. So all of our speakers are embarking on new adventures or really discovering what it is that they love and want out of life. And we've brought this table to allow them to share that with you. So at intermission, afterwards, when you're meeting with them, go over and see what's on the table. We have books. We have 2 authors in the room, 3 actually. Jen, who is speaker number 2, has brought her book. Myself and Dawn Renee, who is our fabulous photographer somewhere in the room. I don't know where she went. We co-authored a book earlier this year. So we have copies of the book here. Everyone has a sign-up sheet, QR codes, so get to know them. There she is, fabulous Dawn Renee, right over there. And connect with them so that you can see what they're up to. Second item of housekeeping business, actually it's number 3. The venue, and I'll talk a little more about the sponsor later, but big thanks to the Tax Hive for allowing us the use of their beautiful space tonight. And I think that's it. Bathrooms are out the door, down that little hall right there on the left, in case anybody needs to know that. All right, shall we get started for real? Yeah, let's get started for reals now. Okay, so the Confidence Catalyst is all about sharing our stories, not the story of who we think people want us to be, or the story of what society says we should be, but the real story. The real stories, the things that happen to us, through us, and for us in this life. And so here we are. And stories for millennia have been a mode of communication for humans. Stories have been used to preserve history, to give instruction, cave paintings on walls, demonstrating how not to be killed by a saber-toothed cat. Survival guides, all of these things come from stories. So why is it then that we all feel like we need to hide those stories of who we are? It's a society thing. So as women, we tend to hide those pieces of us that we think will be judged for, or that might be perceived as too much. I'm here to change that. The mission of the Confidence Catalyst is to empower women to speak up, stand up, share their stories loud and proud. Women have such collective wisdom, such a breadth of experience and knowledge. And the only way we can make an impact on this world is if we get up and bravely, courageously, and vulnerably share it. So tonight, you will get the pleasure of hearing 5 amazing women as they share the story of who they really are. Not the stories of who people wanted them to be, not the stories of what they thought they maybe were supposed to be, but the stories of who they are and what they have been and why they do what they do now. So without further ado, let's welcome our first speaker to the stage. We have Miss Melissa Chipman, who is an artist. She is a very talented painter, and she has traveled the world searching for that thing that really lights her up. Turns out it was art, and it was there all the time, but she didn't discover it until she was 16. She has traveled, and she'll tell you all about this. She has adventured to many places, and she has learned very much about the art of everything. So with her speech tonight, please welcome to the stage, Melissa.
Thank you, April. Is this good length? So, as April said, I'm going to speak tonight about the art of everything. But before I launch into my talk, I want to make an announcement to my friends and family while you're all here tonight. Some of you know that I recently went to Alaska, and while I was there, I got married. What? And not to the person you probably think that I got married to. I committed to myself. So I bought myself an engagement ring to fall in love with me. And then I bought myself a commitment ring to commit to putting myself first. And so when I found out, when I found out about the Confidence Catalyst, I thought, this is perfect, and that's going to be a great way to commit to myself and my goals and my future. So thank you, April, for providing the platform. And as I started brainstorming for this talk, I realized that I actually had a lot of material for a really good book. And so I'm going to take you through the art of everything, of how you can turn your life into a masterpiece. And so it might feel a little bit scatterbrained, but also I have ADHD and I'm just embracing it. So follow me on the journey of my scattered thoughts. But it all started back in high school when I took one of those required electives, and I was joking with my friends and I'm like, oh, look at me, I'm gonna be Bob Ross, I'm taking my first art class. And I started painting and realized that I could paint. And then people just kept encouraging me to keep going with it. And my teacher said, you should take the level 2 class. And so I went on to the level 2 class. And then I did Sterling Scholar. And then I had people buying artwork from me. And then they just never stopped. And so I just accidentally became an artist. And so as I've learned how to paint and refine that skill, I've found so many similarities to life that just keep bouncing back in my head about how we can actually make an art out of life. And what does that actually mean? Like if something's just made, but someone's like, no, they're an artist or there's an art to that, typically that means that they've been able to refine that skill to where it's just like flowy and you just love watching it. Like even on those reels on TikTok or Instagram, and you see guys like throwing stuff onto high shelves because they're just used to doing that same task over and over again. They've created an art out of doing that. And so if you're going to create a good painting, to start out, first of all, you've got to have a vision, right? Got to have some inspiration. And I don't know where I heard it once, probably at a conference, who knows? But someone said to me once upon a time, if you can't see it with your eyes closed, you're probably never going to see it with your eyes open. So you've got to have that vision inside of yourself before you can actually go and start making plans. And I don't know how many here have watched The Secret or read The Secret, right, by Rhonda Byrne. So she talks about how you got to get a vision board and put all your goals on this vision board. And I love that concept, and I was so inspired by it. But I thought vision boards looked really ugly and cluttered. So I decided to put all of my pictures into a saved folder on my desktop and then made that my screensaver on my desktop. And that was across from my bed, and I watched those images roll through every night before I went to bed. And I looked at pictures of Daybreak. It's a community out in South Jordan, and had never lived there, but I saw pictures of that. Then I looked at pictures of the Maasai warrior tribe. I'll talk more about that later. And so I put all these pictures on there, and like an image of this grass hut tree, like on a beach somewhere, and just all these different images and some goals for money and a house. And anyway, so fast forward, I end up getting the opportunity to move into a place in Daybreak from one of my friends. And I, for whatever reason, I had moved in between that, and I never plugged that computer back in. So when I moved into this new place, and I end up plugging that in, and I look at that old screensaver reel, and it was so cool. I was like, oh my gosh, I've actually done all of these things. This is amazing. But we have to back up a little bit. So when I was in college, I started studying art and anthropology. And has anyone here watched Studio C? I figure we're in Provo. There's probably some people who watch Studio C. So it's this comedy skit routine, and in one of their skits, they play the game of life, but it becomes like Jumanji so everything they roll on, it comes to life. And one of the male characters, he spins, and he ends up rolling on getting a college degree, and he's gonna be an artist. And he's like, no, I'm gonna be poor. and then he goes around again, and he spins again, and he gets another college degree, and it's gonna be anthropology. He's like, no, I literally picked the two poorest professions. What was I thinking? And I'm like, yep, that's what I studied. But when I took my first sociocultural anthropology class, I had this professor. He was so quirky, and he'd walk in with a stack of books like the mouse on Cinderella, and he'd just like, on his teeth are like on the cheese, and they're all bouncing all over. That was like his books, and he just like set all of his books out. And then he would tell us about all of his adventures living in Africa with the Maasai warrior tribe for 17 years. And he planted this seed in my heart that I needed to go to Africa. And so fast forward through a lot of life experiences, my friend Allie, who's here tonight in the shiny dress, she was inviting me on all these vacations, and we went to Kauai, and we went to Florida, and I thought, this is so fun, but like, what do I really want to do? Like, if I died in a year, and I thought, oh, I didn't do fill in the blank. And the first thing that popped in my head was, I want to go to Africa. I haven't gone to Africa. And so I remember just feeling so strongly in my heart that that's what I needed to do. And I made that decision. I was like, this year, I'm going to Africa. That is what I'm spending my money on. And so 2 weeks later, I go to a movie event, and I hear some lady talking out of earshot, and she's like, blah, 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 I live in Kenya. And I was like, I need to get to talk to her. And so we start talking, and next thing you know, 2 months later, I'm in Africa with my 9-year-old son, and she had a 9-year-old as well. And so it was such a beautiful experience because the two of us got to travel around, and I just loved sharing all of that land with him. And I'll never forget the moment when we're driving through the Mal Forest, and it's this dirt road that just sinks down, and I mean, you can tell the rain has just washed out like 2 to 3 feet on some areas, and you're watching women walk down 2 hours to go get water with their donkeys that have the buckets strapped to their backs, and as we're getting finally up to the top in the Jeep, and we finally get to the top of this hill, and there they were, like the whole Maasai warrior tribe from that region were all lined up in their traditional garb with all the jewelry and the cloth, and it was just the most amazing moment to know that, like, I made this happen, and I was here, and just feeling that moment of knowing that you're in the place where you're supposed to be and bringing that dream to a reality, which seems so far away, like literally far away. And I walked down this little walkway with all these people lined up and all these children singing a welcome song, and tears just start dropping down my face. I just couldn't hold it back. It was overwhelming. And that night we went to dinner, and Odie, he was like one of our guides, Maasai warrior leader, and we would go around at night and talk about what our favorite moment of the day was. And he said, my favorite moment was when Melissa started crying because we don't show emotion here in our tribe. And when she started crying, I knew that she loved us. and then that same night, this was beautiful, you guys. You can't buy these moments. Well, I kind of did buy it, but you can't plan it. This other 9-year-old boy that's sitting by my son, he was African, and he looks at my son and he goes, Xander, you need to eat your food. There are children here who don't have food. You need to eat your food. And I was like, oh my gosh, an actual child in Africa is telling my kid to eat the food on his plate. So anyway, but there were so many beautiful moments, and he's running around and playing soccer with kids that have no shoes, and these soccer balls are made out of cloth and twine, and they are happy and just running around like they have no cares in the world. And when we got home from Africa, Xander walked into his room, and I'll just never forget, he literally, like, it was like this rush of abundance came over him. And he looked at all of his toys, and he goes, whoa, I have so much stuff. Because here we just spent 2 weeks hanging out with people who have like a roof over their heads, maybe. And he, on his own, went into his room and he just started pulling out toys, and he collected 2 full huge boxes of toys to go give away. And then contacted our friend in Africa and was like, can I give any of these to your son? And so we ended up mailing a whole bunch over to them. But it was such a beautiful moment for him to appreciate what he had. And that's another point, bringing it back to the artistry, right? We have to look at what we've been given. And for whatever reason, I was born in the southern Utah, Sandy, Utah, Delta, all the places that we were born, like this is where we started. And so sometimes when I'm making art, I just look at whatever materials I have, and then sometimes I get that vision and you start creating. And so like even with my trip to Africa, I take my ADHD brain. I hadn't filed my taxes yet. Don't tell Jeff that because he's an IRS person. Anyway, so I hadn't filed my taxes, and so I had my tax return that I could spend, which I probably would have wasted on other things, but thankfully I still had it, so I could buy my tickets to Africa. So sometimes your flaws are the most beautiful thing about you, and they still bring the magic into your life. And another thing that you need is really good materials, not the watered down tempera paint that you can barely make an image out of. You gotta get some good quality stuff. And I think one of the best materials you can have for life is the people in your life. And tonight is a testament to that. I have seriously the best friends. I'm so grateful for all of you, even just coming here tonight. But they are the biggest influence in my life. And they inspire me, they help me, they laugh with me about my stupid dating life. And they've been through me for so long. And my friend Gina here, she connected me with a lady who painted big, huge temple murals. And one day she called me and said, hey, I know someone who needs an artist to come and match paint. And it would just be a temporary position, but do you want to do that? And I thought, sure, I'll go match some paint. So I went up there, and my interview with her was a series of her bringing me a painting, sitting it down on an easel, and then bringing me a blank canvas, and then handing me a palette and saying, I need you to copy this painting. And so I sat there for 8 hours and copied the painting. And then she walked in and said, all right, that looks good. I feel good. Do you feel good about this? I'm like, yeah, I feel good. She's like, okay, well, you can start tomorrow. So that was like the easiest job interview of my life. It was kind of long, but, and one day she had me organize all of her reference images. Actually, by day, I mean, one day she asked me to, and it took like 2 months because she had so many reference images. And one of those binders that I had to put together was of clouds. So she handed me a box and said, I need you to organize all these clouds. So I had to go through and organize all these cloud pictures by front lit clouds, back lit clouds, side lit clouds. What did I miss there? Anyway, all the clouds, sunset, sunrise, they do look different. And so by the end of that, I just remember, because I had to drive from Provo to Wellsburg every day for 30 minutes. And after studying clouds for an entire week, 8 hours a day, I would drive home and I was like, oh, look at those clouds. They're so beautiful. And look how the light's shining through on that part. And look at the purple hue right there. And I love clouds, which is kind of funny because my grandma Chipman used to always say, oh, the glorious clouds. So that was for you, Grandma. Anyway, but I bring that up to say that as you get going in your art processes in life, the more that you study people, the more you can appreciate them and the beauty of them and understand them. And I became, so obviously I'm an artist, right? And then one day I got invited to go to New York. This was on a date. That's for a whole nother story. But he died. I didn't kill him, okay? But I was a murder suspect. And so he invites me on this day. I go out there, end up meeting this lady, Frances. Frances invites me to go to Greece. I don't have any money for Greece. So I end up teaching art lessons. Then art lessons turns into me teaching art classes. And then I start teaching at a school. And then fast forward, now it's 11 years later, and I am dean of students. So I went from being the beloved art teacher that everybody loved and had fun with, and they'd come slough in my class. And now I'm the disciplinarian, which is such a funny joke from the universe because I am the most undisciplined person I know, and I have to enforce all the discipline. But it's also been a really beautiful experience because the more that I've gotten to know all of these kids with various backgrounds and autism, and some kids who are homeless, and some kids who have parents who are abusive, and some whose parents left them. And I look at them, and I have teachers come in and they're like, ugh, that student just drives me crazy and they're such a brat. And I love giving them some perspective and saying, well, So they actually live in a house with 10 other people and their parents are drug addicts. And they don't get a whole lot of love and attention at home. And all of a sudden you can just kind of see the teachers' faces kind of soften. And I'm like, maybe you should just like sit down by them and talk to them and get to know them, because I think they're just looking for some love. That's why they're acting out. That's why most kids act out, is because they're looking for love and attention. And truly, I think that's why any adults act out, because they're saying, look at me, love me, give me attention, somebody see me. And the more that we can get to know people and understand how they work, why they work, how they work, the more you see them for who they really are, and you can love them. And so while I've been teaching, while I was teaching art, I can teach them how to do realism, and that's great and everything, but sometimes those pictures just get kind of boring, and I'm like, yeah, okay, that looks realistic, or it doesn't. Good job, here's your grade. And then I thought, I want them to feel their art. Like, let's get them doing something they care about. So I came up with a way to go through 4 different scenarios of a painting about themselves, a painting about a difficult moment, a painting about a happy moment, and then a painting about someone that was inspirational or influential in their lives. And I would give them like a good week to work on each one. And so after a month, they all had 4 paintings to share. And so they'd come up and they'd share their 4 paintings, and we'd all guess which one was which. And then I gave them the opportunity to share what each painting meant, because we would do it in a symbolic way, and I had them meditate on the feeling of it and on like what the colors would symbolize. And it also helped take away like the pressure of having to do representational art. And so every single time I did this project, kids were crying in my class, telling their stories, whether it was happy tears about someone they loved or sad tears about a difficult moment in their life. And I thought, I think I'm onto something here. So I started doing it in art parties, and actually my friend Kate back there hired me to do it at her company. So we had 30 adults in a room all doing symbolic art therapy together and sharing things that they never would have known otherwise. And so this is where I'm gonna wrap this whole experience up. But whenever you get to share your art, I give some rules for when we critique. Number 1, we talk about what we love about the art. And number 2, we don't criticize it, we critique it, and there is a difference. When you criticize something, you're just being mean. And when you're critiquing something, I tell them, let's talk about how we could enhance or improve it. And if they're not willing to go up and show it, then we don't give them a critique. Most of the time in life, unless somebody's asking you to give you feedback, they're not going to take it. They're going to think it's criticism and not critique. And so I just encourage you in your own lives, as you look at the masterpiece of life that you've been living, what do you love about it? What can you enhance or improve? And then just enjoy the process.
Whew, girl. If you didn't know, some of you know Melissa. She used to be a stand-up comic, and I can see why now. So here's to wiping our canvases clean every now and then and starting over, right? A thought occurred to me while Melissa was speaking that she spent many, many days, one time, just looking at clouds and organizing clouds by their qualities and their traits. Perhaps that experience is what has led her to where she is now, where she can see kids that might be struggling or might be troubled or have more going on under the surface. But she can see those backlit kids, those frontlit kids, those sidelit kids, the sunrise kids and the sunset kids for who they really are, and offer them support. So thank you. All right, let's keep going because we have 4 more amazing stories to hear. You guys doing okay out there? Everybody's good? All right. There's water in the back if you need it. I have gotten spoiled to moist Pacific Northwest air, so this Utah air, It's very dry, but it's okay. There's plenty of water back there. All right, our next speaker is a published author, which she will tell you all about, and a mom of 3, which she will also tell you all about. And here to share her journey tonight of letting herself bloom is Jen Banks.
Well, I need to pick on my husband for a minute just because he's here, tease him a little bit. When we were first married, I had a big race, and I told him that the finish line would be by McDonald's and that I would meet him there. It was in a canyon, and so he dropped me off and we parted ways. Well, I got to the finish line and nobody was there to greet me. He was literally at McDonald's, so I'm grateful he's here today and he made it the whole way here. So, in Thailand, there are many statues of Buddha. Some are small, some are big, and they're all made of different materials. One particular ordinary-looking Buddha statue stands 10 feet tall and is made of clay. During the 1950s, they needed to move this statue from a Buddhist monastery over to a temple in Bangkok. One of the workers during the movement noticed that there was a crack in the skull of the statue. So he investigated a little bit and was very surprised at what he saw. He got out his chisel and was starting to peel back layers. He saw something shiny, and come to find out, this statue was actually made of solid gold. This was only in the 1950s, but it is known that hundreds of years ago, monks covered the statue with clay to preserve its true value. The Burmese armies were about to invade Thailand, and so they covered it and preserved it so that it would remain for its true value. It now is worth over $240 million. Just like that statue, we often cover ourselves or our true worth with layers. Layers of doubt, insecurity, fear, and we begin to forget our true worth. Sometimes we identify with those layers and begin to believe that that's our true nature, when really our true value is always within us. It's just waiting for us to embrace it. When I was 12 years old, I wanted to be a cheerleader. At that age, you didn't have to you didn't have to try out. All you had to do was sign up and you were automatically on the team. I loved the dances, the outfit, the choreographed dance and the cheers. It was all just so fun for me. But I looked around and felt like I wasn't as pretty as the other girls. I was sharing this with my coach, and she said, "Well, we need nice cheerleaders too." It was as if she was affirming that I wasn't the pretty one. I wasn't as pretty as the other girls, just like I had worried about. She was saying that my worth was in being the nice one. And when we use the opinions of others to decide what we're worth, that's called using our derived lens. This lens is circumstantial. It's based on who we're with, what we're doing, what other people think, and it's not our true worth. It's just the appearance of maybe those layers, just like the Buddha. When we're using our inherent lens, we remember our inherent worth, our inherent value, that solid gold within us. This is our identity, and we were born with our worth. It doesn't increase, it doesn't decrease, it's always there. I want you to take a moment and close your eyes and think about your identity, your core. It's easy to forget who we are sometimes, especially when we identify with those layers or we try to see ourselves as other people see us. Sometimes it takes challenges, adversity, a life change, a decision, or a realization, just like that crack in the statue, to sort of peel back those layers and to reveal more of who we truly are. A few years later, after that cheerleading choice, I took the dreaded ACT. Many of you know this is a standardized test to apply to colleges. And I needed a certain score, 27, in order to get a scholarship that would pay for more than half of my tuition. On the day of the test, I went in and I had studied, but I didn't really know what to expect. And so I took the test and I got a 24. So I recommitted, I studied, I got some books from the library to help me, and I took it again, and I got a 25. I knew that that's not what I wanted, so I studied again, and I had started this process in my junior year, so I knew I had a little bit more time to work on it. I took it again, and I got a 26. So close. Each time I took it, it was peeling back some of those layers because I had to work through the doubt, the comparison, the worry. What if I wasn't capable? What if I couldn't get there? All of my other friends are seeming to do this just fine. Why can't I? So I took it again, and I got a 26 again. I was so determined, so I took it again. This would be my 5th time, and I got a 27. I was so excited, just checking the computer that day. I was in disbelief, but I had revealed my true character, which was grit and persistence and not giving up. After I had my 2nd child, I wanted to lose the baby weight. It hadn't come off as easily as with my 1st child. And so I decided to hire a personal trainer. And with her, I was able to lose 50 pounds. And so I felt pretty good about life. I said, okay, I know how to do this. I can do this with all my next children. I didn't want to wait until I had all my children before getting fit or working on my health. And so the real test, though, that true adversity came after my 3rd child, where I had a difficult pregnancy, I had diastasis recti, and I couldn't exercise the way I had learned with my personal trainer, the way I was used to. And so I still haven't lost the 50 pounds that I had lost before. And so that has been the real challenge, to think about my worth and to realize that I'm still myself. I'm still that gold interior, even if I have extra weight or extra whatever. It doesn't mean anything about my true nature. Another lesson I've had to learn is that my worth is not on my accomplishments. It's not based on what I can do in a day. I tend to pile things on my to-do list. Maybe you can relate. I add so many things, and when I have free time, I fill it with more. And it took a really long time, and I'm still working on it, but I had to learn that my worth is in being and not doing. Maybe there are things that you base your worth on that are external or having to do with your derived lens. Again, with my busyness, I'm kind of just like a kid in the candy store. There's so many things I want to try and do and be and eat and have, but just like a diet of candy isn't sustainable, a life filled with busyness isn't sustainable. I became overwhelmed, depleted, exhausted, and I realized that I had breadth in life, but not depth. I had to learn about boundaries, saying no, and that saying no to something often means saying yes to something better. A layer of doubt and fear that I removed was in preparation for writing my book. I wrote my book in a week in April this past year, 2024. The publisher that I worked with, that's one of her signature specialties, is taking you on an author adventure. And I went to the Muir Woods in California to write this book. What people don't see, though, is that it was 8 years in the making, 8 years of peeling back these layers, deciding I'm good enough and worthy to write a book or to be an author, and that it was longer than just a week. You know, it was working through all of those things that come up as we are human and as we compare ourselves to others and as we just have that self-doubt. I believe in the law of attraction, and manifesting. Around this time of year, October, November, is when I really love to make my New Year's resolutions. I think it's because of the change of the seasons, or my birthday's in November as well, that just feels like a new, fresh start. So last year, at this time, I said, I'm going to write a book in 2024. And I claimed it. 2 weeks into January is when I met my publisher, and things just started falling into place. So I know that if you put in the work, you have the vision, you claim something, you claim your true worth, your true identity, you can make it happen. Growing up, I didn't always take no for an answer, and I know for a fact this gave my mom grief. But right now it's my greatest superpower, because I am able to say my own yeses and to make it happen. I've always wanted a tattoo for as long as I can remember. But due to religious upbringing and conditioning and things I'd been taught, I didn't even want to draw on myself because I didn't think that it was the right thing to do. But in 2024, I claimed that dream as well. I decided to get a tattoo the day I finished writing my book, and it was in California. And my publisher was driving us all back to the airport to fly home. Little did she know I had been planning this the whole week, and I had looked and I had found the tattoo parlor. I'd made sure I didn't need to have an appointment. I looked up the reviews, the ratings, and I was gonna make it happen. So early in the week, I kind of planted some seeds along the way, and I was expressing to her, I said, oh, this would be a great time to get a tattoo. Great time to symbolize this journey, this experience, this such a great mark of what I had accomplished. And she's like, oh yeah, that'll be cool. And I think she said something about finding a local tattoo artist and really make sure you find the right one, and all of these lessons that she had learned. So again, we're driving to the airport on this last day, and I say, hey, there's this tattoo parlor not very far. It's like on the way. We still have a little while before our flight. Let's go there. And she said, oh, I don't know about this. Well, luckily it was in San Francisco, Fisherman's Wharf, and we were going there anyway. She wanted to show us this pearl shop where they actually get pearls from the ocean and you can buy them. And so then right next door was Cleopatra Inc. And so we walked in. Oh, okay, I just told the story wrong. We were along the wharf, but yeah, so she was driving us, and I suggested that we go here. And more hesitation was coming up for her. She had some layers going on. And she said, are you sure you want to do this? What if your family gets mad at me? All of these sorts of fears and questions. And I said, you can drop me off here and I'll walk, but I'm going to get a tattoo. And so I was not taking no for an answer. So she dropped me off, and then later she joined us after she had worked through those things, and she said, sorry, it was just things that were coming up for me with my ex-husband and all of those sorts of things. But she was there to support me in the journey, and it's right here on my arm. It says become, and it matches the cover of my book. It's a flower on the cover of my book. So my book is called Let Yourself Bloom, and it's about maintaining your identity in motherhood specifically. When I was pregnant with my oldest child, I had seen a lot of women who seemed unsure of what to do with themselves when their kids went into school or when they were empty nesters. And I decided right then that I wasn't going to lose my identity. I made a goal that I was going to pursue my dreams right alongside motherhood. And I did it. My book was published before my son was even 2. And it's a big job to hold motherhood and something else, but it's possible. We don't have to sacrifice our dreams. We can be a mom and. I want you to think about a dream that you have. Close your eyes and think about something that you want to accomplish this next year. Now think about those layers. What fears, expectations, or beliefs are covering your brilliance, your gold interior? Each day we have a choice to peel back the layers or to leave them in place and continue to use our derived lens to see the world. These layers can make us feel trapped and stuck. And life doesn't just happen. It's a choice. Step by step, layer by layer, to reclaim your identity and become the person you were always meant to be. So tonight, I encourage you to reclaim your identity, reclaim your dreams, peel back those layers, and live a life filled with less pressure, less doubt, less fear, and a life filled with more of the gold that truly matters, because you are golden.
Thank you so much, Jen. All right, she's right. We are all golden, and we put up these layers just like we build walls. We protect ourselves, and I tell my speakers all the time that your story is your bridge to connection. So build bridges, not walls. Peel away those layers. Build those bridges, build those connections. You'll find you have much more in common with people than you think, and that's how we get stronger together, is when we build those connections. All right, shall we move on? Let's move on. Speaker number 3 is embarking on a brand new journey. Her life has changed immensely in the last 5-6 months or so, and she's just embracing every minute of it. And I was just in awe when I heard everything that came out of her mouth on our first call together that she had been through in the last few months. I was like, wow, that's a lot. And she's just owning it like she planned it that way. I think maybe she did. Maybe she's a mastermind. I don't know. Anyways, here tonight to share her story of untethered authenticity is Sammy Bricko.
I would like to pretend that I planned it, but I did not. So I kind of want to start off with a little quote that ChatGPT wrote based off of my speech and what it knows about me. When I live in alignment with my truth, people follow suit. Authenticity is living in my truth, stepping out of the mold that others have tried to place me in, and becoming the person I was always meant to be. Every year, instead of doing, yearly goals or yearly, New Year's resolutions kinds of things that we all kind of fall short on, I started a few years ago that I was going to pick a word, and I was going to live and embody what that word was. This word that I chose this year was authentic. Authenticity. While I may not have known what authentic was meaning for me at the time and how powerful that tiny little word was, what I knew in my core, deep in my soul, was that I wanted to be authentic in myself, standing true in my power, and being me. When we make decisions in life, it's not just an overnight thing. We don't just think of it kind of like Jen. It's a time, it's a process. And really, this story that I am going to explain didn't just happen overnight. It was tiny little things along the way that made one big explosion. So to start our story, I'm going to take you back to 2022. My husband at the time was manic. He went into full-blown psychosis, and he spent a week in the mental hospital. I, being a single mom while he was in the hospital, was doing all that I could with no support of very many people. When he was released, the doctor that they gave him put him on 3 different medications every week for 3 weeks. He was changing his medication. If you know anything about mental health, it's one big no-no. So 3 weeks on July 13th of 2022, in the middle of the night, I got a knock on the door from the cops. Ma'am, your husband drove your car into somebody else. And I sat there and I was like, okay, is he alive? He's alive, but he's in the hospital. I said, okay. The cop left, and I sat there, and I knew in that moment I was no longer stable. There was no safety. I was not safe in this house, and not only was I not safe in this house, My son was 2, and he could have been in that car. He was not safe in this house. While it may sound selfish, and it's something I've had to sit with, I had to make a choice in that moment. And in that moment, I realized that when he was leaving the hospital, he wasn't coming home. I couldn't let him come back to live in the house. I needed time to sit and to be. So he went to his parents' house. Me and my son stayed home. And about a week after, I realized I'm kind of happier with you not here. Had nothing to do with the mental health issues. Had everything to do with everything leading up to the mental health issues. And I realized that I needed to ask for a separation. As I was leaving his parents' house telling him that I wanted to be separated, there was a feeling in my body that I can't really explain unless you know much about your chakras. If you know anything about your chakras, your root chakra is your base chakra. It's your grounding, it's your stability, it is your I am statement. And as I drove, the sensation that I had running through my legs was the most tingling of sensations, the spiral of the red of the root chakra, and I felt alive. When I got home and a few weeks after, I started wearing the clothes I wanted to wear. I started cutting my hair the way I wanted to, styling it the way I wanted to, and using my voice in a different way that I never really used before. It was during, I'm also a lash artist. It was during an appointment with a client of mine where she told me after after I was doing her lashes, she said, "Sam, you are like enticing right now, like your magnetism, and I kind of want to be around you. Can I just hang out with you afterwards?" And I was like, I mean, sure, everyone wants to hang out with me, right? But as she was telling me this, she was like, something is different about you. Something is shining in you, and I just want to be around you. And I was like, well, thank you. Like, it's a really good compliment to get from anyone, right? However, as fate would have it, we decided to work things out, my husband and I. So after 2 months of being separated, we got back together. And we got back together with the idea that we were going to thrive in each other's company. We were going to excel with each other. And it's not to say that we didn't, to a point. But also the biggest reason for me was I wanted to get back for my kid, which is never the reason to stay with someone, mind you. As we got back together, old patterns started coming up. He would tell me things like, "You know I'm the best you'll ever have. You'll never find better than me, Sam. I am unrivaled to anyone, Sam." Okay, sure. Now, all of this happened. We got back together in September of 2022. October of 2022, my husband got served with felony charges. He was going to court for third-degree felonies for intent to harm somebody else because of the car crash that he was in. Mind you, it wasn't a felony. He didn't do it on purpose. He was in psychosis. It would be no different than if he were to have a heart attack on the road. But from December of 2022 until September of 2023, we were in and out of the courts every single month. Constant whiplash, constant everything. It was all about what was going on with Alex and Alex's life. I was a mom, I was a wife, and I was a boss. I was running my own business. I didn't really have an identity. I was just living in the mold that I was mom, wife, boss. So in September of 2023, Alex got the charges dropped. They had no grounds for it. A week later, after being on cloud 9, because we were done with the whole court thing, a week later, he lost his job. It was right back to, Sam, be a wife, clean the house, be a mom, take care of the kid, continue working because there's really no other option for you but to work. You are now the breadwinner once again. Mind you, in 7 years that we were together, he was unemployed for a whole year. I was the breadwinner, which is fine. However, it took a toll because on top of all of the court and all of the mental health and just everything before, I didn't have an identity anymore. I knew I had my business, but I am not defined by my business. I am not defined by just mom, by just wife. So in December of 2023, I met with Naomi High. If anyone knows her, she is an amazing medium, an amazing person to talk to. And she asked me, she said, Sam, what is your biggest fear? I said, I don't know. She said, no, really, really think about it. What are you most scared of? And I sat there and I went back to 5th grade elementary class when you learn all about volcanoes and earthquakes and all the bad things that can happen in the world. And I said, well, I'm kind of scared of the supervolcano. That thing could erupt at any time. She said, okay. Now, what's the worst case scenario? This thing erupts, then what? I said, well, we all die. I don't know. She said, okay, sit with that. But I want you to think about it this way. What if you are your supervolcano? What if you are scared of your own eruption? What is the worst case scenario that could happen there? I don't know, everyone dies. It's kind of just the gist of it, right? But as luck would have that, I did erupt. I erupted pretty big about a week later. It didn't take long and it didn't take much. But I erupted and it scared my husband, it scared my kid. Both my dogs peed on the floor, it scared them too. And I realized that it wasn't the eruption that I was scared of. It was feeling the feelings of everything I had suppressed for years. This didn't stem just for the last few months. It didn't stem from the last few years. It stemmed from the very beginning when I first started to live in a mold that somebody else placed me in. It started when my mom wanted me to be somebody else. It started when my dad told me, you're gonna go to college. You're going to go do this. It started every time my husband told me, I'm the best you're ever going to get. Suppress, suppress, suppress. We can only suppress so much in our life before we literally explode. And growing up, I just wanted to be with the cool kids. I wanted to sit at the cool kid table. To me, my family was the cool kids, and I wanted to be just like them. Until I realized my family is not the cool people. And the thing with cool people and the thing with popular people is that when you separate all of the popular people and you get them one-on-one individually, they're a different person, right? They're not the mold of what you see. As Jen talks about the cheerleaders. A group of cheerleaders are kind of intimidating, but you take them all apart, there's nothing scary about them. They're all nice. They're all their own individual, authentic people. So, as we bring this story to this year, May 22nd, 2024, the day I like to call the peanut butter and jelly sandwich story. Anyone who follows me on social media knows my fear of peanut butter and jelly sandwiches right now. And let me tell you why. May 22nd, all of the moms in here can understand. It's one of those days where you wake up and it is non-stop. No support, no help, nothing. But you gotta take care of your kid. You gotta work. You gotta try to somehow find some time to eat. Maybe you don't eat. I didn't. And I woke up that morning, I had a lash client at 7 a.m. And then I had another appointment outside the house, rushing my kid everywhere. Then had to come home, see another lash client. And then after that, I had to go to my brother's 3-hour plus time graduation. And from there, I had to go to karate, go home to hopefully eat some dinner, and then go to swim lessons. Well, once me and my son and my husband were almost to the house, I decided to ask my husband a question. Now, mind you, my husband was the type of guy that you had to literally think about what you were going to ask him and how you were going to ask him. If there was a tone, if there was attitude, if there was any hint of a demand, chances are whatever you asked was not going to happen. So I thought long and hard about this. All I wanted was a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. All I wanted was to go home, take 20 minutes to ride the Peloton, take a shower real quick, eat my peanut butter and jelly sandwich on the way to swim lessons. That's all I wanted. So I thought, and I thought, and I thought. And as we were pulling into the neighborhood, I looked at my husband and I said, hey, would you mind when we get home, could you make me a peanut butter and jelly sandwich? Because I want to ride the Peloton for just 20 minutes, take a shower. By the time I'm done, grab the sandwich, grab the kid, get in the car, and we'll head to swim lessons. I didn't think it was rude. However, his reaction told me that I demanded him to do it or I would backhand him and lash him. He went off on me. How could you be so selfish to think that I should make you a peanut butter and jelly sandwich while you go do something for yourself? I'm not doing that. Are you kidding me? Heard. Got it. Once again, I no longer feel safe in this relationship. Once again, I can no longer ask you a question without getting berated, without getting lashed. So I'm good. So I went home and I made that peanut butter and jelly sandwich myself. I put it in a bag, went upstairs, still rode my Peloton, screamed a little bit, blasted the music, I believe it was Cardi B, and just let my emotions out on the Peloton for about 20 minutes, took a shower, said, okay, time for swim lessons. So we get in the car, I grabbed my sandwich, sitting in the little console right here. And as we're driving, my husband asks, are you gonna eat that sandwich? And I sat there and I was like, first of all, when I get mad, if I have emotions, I don't really wanna eat, right? You just don't really feel hungry. So I sat there and I was like, I don't think so. He said, cool, grabs it, and he eats my sandwich. After all of that, he ate my sandwich. Again, this is why I don't eat peanut butter sandwiches anymore, guys. So that was on May 22nd, and I realized that there was a lot of things that I just was like, this just isn't right. Fast forward about a week later, June 3rd. On June 3rd, I obviously have some trauma surrounding people getting in cars and driving erratically. And I found out that my mom had gotten in a car, intoxicated and emotional. And my friend who told me, I drove straight to my mom's house where my stepdad and brother were, and I was like, what is going on? And as I'm there sitting there talking to them, I get a phone call from my friend. He said, hey, I found your mom. She's at this arena parking lot. Why don't you come here? I said, okay. So go to the arena. I see the car there. I open the door. He's crying in the back seat. My mom's crying in the front seat. And I'm just like, what did I get myself into? And I sat in the car with them. And as my mom cried and cried and cried, I realized that she had an intent. I say intent loosely, but to want to kill herself. She wanted to end it. She was done. She hated life. Not only did she hate life, she hated her husband, she hated her friends, and she hated her kids. Because her kids hated her husband hated her, and everyone hated her. And as I sat there in the car with her, realizing that I drove all the way out here to support you, to comfort you, You hate everyone. And I really started to kind of like play that slow motion movie that we all have in the back of our heads sometimes, where my mom's never been happy. She's never lived a life that she truly, truly loved. Until maybe now, I don't know. But she never had that. She's not in a happy marriage. She's not in a happy life. And in that moment, I realized, if I stay married, this is my life. This is my future. This is what shines for me. And I don't want that. I actually kind of like my kid. He's kind of cool. I don't want to hate him one day. So I went home, and on June 4th, so June 3rd to June 4th, I asked my husband for a divorce that day. I said, look, I'm not happy. I can't do this anymore. This is not the life I want to live. And I saw my future last night, and I'm just not here for it. I genuinely am sorry. You know, kind of. So as time progressed, on July 8th, so between June 4th and July 8th, I launched my first coaching program. In fact, Lindsay, lovely Lindsay sitting back there, encouraged me to launch it. She said, you've been sitting on it. Launch it. Do it. Why would you not? So I did. I launched I can't remember how many week program it was, in the midst of this divorce. And the whole program, the whole concept of my program, the whole concept of my business, of my coaching, is to help empower women to live in alignment with themselves, to live an authentic life that is theirs by untethering themselves from fear, limiting beliefs, anxiety, emotions, whatever it may be, maybe people. Untether yourself from the things that are holding you back or holding you down. So July 8th, I launched my course. 6 amazing women joined it, and they held me accountable as I held them accountable through some pretty sticky times. July 12th, we listed our house. July 12th, we got a full offer in on our house, and they were going to cover closing costs. July 13th, we accepted the offer on the house. July 30th, I signed on my divorce. July 31st, we signed on the house. Done. August 3rd, I moved into my apartment on my own. And on September 5th, my divorce was finalized. I don't tell you this timeline to say, look at me, look at how fast I did it. I tell you this timeline to let you know that when you stand firm in your power, you stand firm in your belief, and you align your life with what you know you're supposed to be doing, or what you feel in your heart and soul you know what you're supposed to be doing, the universe says, ask and ye shall receive. Here you go. On a silver platter, let me give you what I know you want. Authenticity is not about perfection. There is nothing perfect about being authentic. It's just being. It's a progress. It's a work in progress. And it's something like a roller coaster. There's going to be whiplash. There's going to be ups and highs and laughing and giggling, and there's going to be plummets where you scream and just want to jump off. But you stay on, because the finish line of your authentic life and your authentic truth is 100% worth the whiplash, the broken back, the broken hips, whatever else is happening. It's worth it at the end. During my divorce process, I went to therapy with my mom. And the therapist asked us when we got there, he said, Sam, what do you want to gain from this? And I sat there and I looked at my mom and I said, I want an authentic relationship with you. And it was her response that made me realize, I'm good. I don't need a relationship with you at all. Because her response confirmed what I had always felt. Her response was, okay, cool. Who do I get? Social media Sam? Or do I get the girl I gave birth to? And I sat there and I was like, okay, social media Sam, I don't know, she's got a pretty cool life. It's all filtered, right? It's sunshines and rainbows. I don't know, I'm pretty real and raw on my social media. I do get cry videos, I am that person, cringe, I know. But I want to show up authentically on my social media because I'm not hiding behind anything. I don't want to hide behind anything. There is nothing to hide behind. So I'm sitting here being like, again, she's kind of cool. But it was the other part. Do I get the girl I gave birth to? First of all, what you gave birth to was a baby. And this baby is moldable. This baby is someone that you get to change. You get to create her life. You get to have control over her. You don't get that. Because that baby has grown up into me. I have endured trauma. I have endured life. I just live. We all live and we have trauma, right? But through all of that, I've become who I am because of it, because of that roller coaster ride. I'm no longer tethering myself to the grips of what people think I should be. And if I could offer you any piece of advice, is that when people think you should be something, do the opposite. Don't do it. Because that's not you. Be your own person. Stand in your own firm belief that when someone tells you something like, you're never going to get better than me, watch me. Stand firm in that. Because you will. Even if it's not another human, it's yourself. And you will be better for it. Again, this is not a linear journey. It is a roller coaster ride from literal hell and heaven, in the highs and the lows. Your journey is just the beginning. You're going to untether yourself, and you're going to stand firm in your boundaries the moment you decide you're worth it. So, I'm going to take you back to my little quote, maybe, if I can find it. When I live in alignment with my truth, people follow suit. Authenticity is living in my truth, stepping out of the mold that others have put me in, and becoming the person I was always meant to be. The people follow suit. People will. People will fall in and out of alignment with you. This year alone, in 6 months, not even, I lost a 7-year marriage and relationship. I lost an 8-year friendship that I thought was inseparable. I lost a 23-year-old friendship. Once again, I thought it was inseparable. 23 years, how many people have friends that, I'm finally to that age that I can say that. Lost, gone. Because as I started to live in alignment with myself, they couldn't follow suit. And that's okay. Because now the people that I have by my side are the people who are authentic in their own ways. They align themselves to their truth, to their authenticity, and I get to be there with them. And I get to show up with them. So, as I stand here before you today, I want to remind you that you are worth it. You are worth your authentic truth. To stand firm in your boundaries, you do not have to people please. That is not for you. No means no. It's a simple word. And be true to you. Thank you.
Moving on, here we go. The second half of tonight's program has a little humor, a little, what's the opposite of humor? Sadness, grief, some heavy stuff. But we're going to go on a journey. We're going to continue going on this journey tonight with our remaining 2 speakers. They have actually been with me the longest for this particular program. We first intended on doing the Confidence Catalyst here in August, which, as I think about it now, was a terrible idea because school starts and it's hot here in August. So, as luck would have it, as Sammy would say, the universe aligned. And when I said, I think we need to move this, it struck me with lightning and said, do it in November. And I said, okay. And Gina and Elle had already signed on to say, hey, we are ready. We are ready to be brave and bold and share our stories and dig deep and really figure out who we are and define who we are. So they've been with me since what, June, I think? I don't know. And it's been so much fun. If you don't know Gina, probably you all do because she's the most amazing connector I have ever met in my life. Gina was like, you know what, let's fill this thing up. And she did. She connected me with the other speakers. And she really had a big hand in making this event come to fruition tonight. So for that, everybody please thank Gina. Thank you. Yes. So now, after 5 months of working together, it is my great pleasure to introduce to you our next speaker, sharing her crazy story, and I'll just let her tell you all about it. Please welcome to the stage, Gina Nunez.
So, as I'm standing here on stage, it's all kind of crazy because when I sat with April at the beginning and she told me to dig deep, and she told me I would find my story, and I started writing and writing and writing, and I found that I had to tell the story that I've dug so deep and not shared for so long, and but it's the story that I'm supposed to share tonight, so I'm going to share it. So I first want to ask each of you to think of the word impossible. And then I want you to take that word and break it in 2. I'm possible. Every time you see that word or you think about that word, I want you to think about breaking into 2. That's how it's spelled, right? So I'm going to paint you a picture of what a hot mess looks like and explain a little bit further. So let me take you back to a night that felt more like a scene from an action movie than real life. It was about midnight, and I was sound asleep, and I was jolted awake by a loud crash. And I looked out my window, and it was just like, oh, geez. We live on a lake, and we were in the massive windstorm. And we were in the middle of a basement project, and my husband's tools and boards and all the things were outside. So I rushed downstairs and got my 3 teens, because they were still up, and woke my husband up. And we rushed outside. We rushed out into the chaos. And the wind was fighting against us at every turn. We were grabbing boards and trying to walk with them, swaying and getting everything done. And Fernando, in the meantime, headed to the lake. So flashlights were dancing in the light, and we were just gathering everything as fast as we could, trying to get into the house. As you can imagine, it's kind of a nightmare mess, right? Well, Fernando headed to the lake to go be able to check on all of our things. He was checking our kayaks and our paddle boards, and we'd just gotten this big water trampoline, a 15-foot behemoth, complete with a launch pad and a slide. It was anchored in the lake, so we're good, right? Nope. Right as he opened that gate, the trampoline propelled itself onto the shore, trapping my husband momentarily between the launch pad and the trampoline. So now we were on a rescue mission to get my husband. So we went out and we decided we needed to manually deflate this trampoline so that we could free him. So we all started laying on top. Each one of us took a side and we started manually deflating. Well, it worked. We freed him and he went inside the house. And he went to go get the deflation pump to be able to speed up the process, because remember, we're still in a massive windstorm. There's 50-mile-an-hour wind gusts, and it's crazy town out here, right? So things were going okay until they weren't. All of a sudden, I felt it. that all too familiar feeling. My body was giving way. Because of all of the stress and the chaos, my body was starting to shut down. My potassium had dropped, and that meant trouble. And so here I lay as it's deflating, and now I know that I no longer am going to be able to move. My kids called out because, we're still in this chaotic mess, and I answered them in a slurred, mumbled voice, and they knew what was wrong. So they ran for their dad. So here I am, laying flat-faced on the ground on this deflating trampoline as gusts of wind are happening, and I'm just picturing myself getting launched into the lake. Helpless doesn't even begin to describe how I felt. I couldn't move. The trampoline had toppled over me, and my kids couldn't see me. They just could hear me. They knew I was somewhere in that mess. And so Fernando came, and he got me back safely to the house, but it was quite an adventure. So now I'm a rag doll. So he had to lay flat on his stomach. You've all met my husband. So he had to lay flat on his stomach, pull me onto his back, and walk into the house carrying me like this, with my kids on the opposite sides, making sure I didn't fall off, all while the wind was still blowing, right? So then we get inside the house, we get comfortably inside the home, I'm in bed, and I start talking to my kids in perfect Spanish. And they look at each other and like, oh, great, Mom's in Spanish mode again. You see, I served a mission in Paraguay, and I learned a second language. And my brain, as amazing as it is, when it doesn't know how to get the words out properly in English, just reverts to Spanish. So think of Buzz Lightyear. You know when in Buzz Lightyear in the Toy Story movie and all of a sudden Buzz Lightyear gets switched to Spanish mode and they're like, Buzz is in Spanish mode, turn him off. That's kind of how my kids felt. And they looked at each other, they didn't know what I was saying. Luckily, I'm married to a Latin who does know what I'm saying, and they all agreed that they all need to learn Spanish. That was just a snapshot of my life with hypokalemic periodic paralysis, or HPP, because honestly, who has time to say that whole mouthful? But it's the only version that my 4 kids know. It's the only version they have ever known. And it's a journey filled with constant obstacles and surprises. Because with this disease, you never know exactly what's going to happen. My husband likes to joke that I am like a Ferrari that runs on premium gas and burns through extremely quickly. So I'm high maintenance, I guess you could say. I like to say it quality maintenance as he corrects me, but I take more potassium in a day than anyone should. It would actually, anyone else would die, or it would at least give them a heart attack. But that's my everyday life. That uncertainty, though, has woven every aspect into our life, becoming as familiar as breathing. So HPP is a neuromuscular disease that affects my muscles, leaving me temporarily paralyzed, unable to walk, talk, or even move. Oftentimes, I can turn into a rag doll. And most mornings, I don't know how it's going to go. I used to push them away a lot and think I was fine. I'm fine, until I wasn't, I would fall. And I've learned now to listen to my body. But I used to think that needing him was a weakness. And now I've realized that it's a gift. It's a gift of love. I've realized that true strength is letting others help us when we need it. My journey has not been easy. In fact, it's been everything but easy. I have been in more ER visits and hospital stays and horrible experiences than I could probably write a book about, and diagnosed with everything but the truth. I had so many doctors look at me thinking they knew what was right, and would just diagnose me with this, that, or the other. Or a lot of them just told me it was in my head because, all the answers came back normal. And all the tests came back normal. My blood work, my EKGs, my MRIs, everything always came back normal. Because when my potassium drops, it's ever so slight and it's in my muscles that they could never catch it. It's a very, very rare disease. Anyway, so what happened though was 7 years ago, things changed. My mom went to an event at BYU. And when she was at this event, you get to choose the different classes you go to. And this particular time, she had chosen a class that she was going to go to, and she found herself in another room. And when she found herself in this room, she realized that that's not the room she was supposed to be in, but she knew she was supposed to stay. So she did. And as she stayed, this woman on stage that was in a wheelchair started sharing her story. And as my mom listened to the story, she realized that this story was like mine. She felt like she was telling my story. And so she knew she needed to go and talk to her. Now, anyone that knows my mom, I love her to death, but she is an introvert. She will walk to the opposite side of the road to not talk to somebody when I'll walk to the other side of the road to talk to somebody. But she's also one that really follows the Spirit, and she knew she needed to talk to this woman. So this angel named Shauna came into my life. Shauna told her what she had, and she called me and told me. And I said, Mom, it's not that. She said, you need to talk to her. And I said, Mom, I was already diagnosed with that 7 years ago. It's not that. And what had happened is 7 years previously, I had had a really terrible attack. I was in my 3rd trimester with my daughter. And there's a lot leading up to that attack, a lot of divine intervention. But in this moment, a neurologist came into the room. And at the time I was taking seizure meds, I was not able to drive, and I had been taking seizure meds for 3 years. And this doctor said, oh, I've seen this before. And he diagnosed me with HPP. Well, the problem was he didn't know how to treat it. So he gave me a certain medication, didn't realize that potassium was a huge piece of the puzzle, and gave me a $250 bill for writing me a letter so I could get my driving privilege back. But I had just decided that it was just another misdiagnosis. But I knew that I needed to talk to this woman. So I did. I called Shauna, I talked to her, and she told me a little bit about her story, and I could not believe how parallel our lives were. You see, Shauna, her disease has progressed a lot further than mine. And so every time a new aspect of my disease comes, because it continues to progress, she is there, and she's like that guiding light for me to help me be able to navigate the new changes. But not only that, Shauna was there for my very first doctor appointment. She connected me with my doctor, and she came to my first appointment. And she's just been that constant in my life. But that discovery was like a missing puzzle piece to the lifelong puzzle that I had been trying to figure out. It was like the answer had finally come. From then on, I stopped asking, why me? And I started asking, okay, God, what do you want me to learn from this? That mindset transformed me. It transformed my life. HPP stopped defining me. With God, it started refining me. You see, we don't get to choose our circumstances. We do get to choose how we respond to them. And we can choose to respond to them and ask, why me? Or we can choose to respond to them and look at what is the lesson here and who am I to help in this process. I learned to manage my disease pretty well, and things were going pretty great until they weren't. Thank you, perimenopause. I didn't even know that existed until it hit me dead in the face. So for a month and a half, I went without walking. Every morning I would wake up and I couldn't walk. There would be a few hours maybe in the day that I'd walk for a little bit and my potassium would drop again and I was back in my wheelchair. And I was pretty much in my wheelchair for a month and a half straight. And I'm an eternal optimist. However, in that moment, my fire was starting to dim. And I was starting to wonder if this was my new reality. But you see, I wanted to go to this event, and I knew I needed to be there. And it was this event called Ignition Point Live. So the night before, I wrote in my gratitude journal how, as if the day had already happened. I wrote how I was so grateful that I had woken up with tons of energy, walking, and all the people I met. And the next morning, I woke up walking with energy and drove to the event. Little did I know the trajectory change that was coming, though. So I sat in the front, and as I sat, this man came on stage named Jeff Griffin, and Jeff was in a wheelchair, something I knew pretty well. And Jeff continued to share his story of how he was a BYU football player, and he had an accident, a freak accident actually, and ended up paralyzed. And he went to 16 different doctors trying to find one that could tell him he would walk again. Because he was determined to be able to walk hand in hand with his wife and to walk his daughter down the aisle. His speech was incredible. He talked about creating habits, and he talked about the impossible. And then he did something, and he said something to me that made me never see the word impossible again the same way. And he said, "Impossible? I'm possible." And he stood up from his wheelchair, and he walked across that stage. There wasn't a dry eye in the audience. It was beautiful. But in that moment, God spoke to my heart, and he said to me, "Gina, you are meant for greatness. You are meant for more. And your story is meant to be shared." So at that moment, I knew I could no longer hide this part of me, that this part of me was meant to be shared. But that it reignited that flame inside of me. And that was my ignition point. At the Ignition Point Live, I had my own ignition point. And my purpose was regained. And it was incredible because I realized that I can embrace my challenges and help others in the journey. And that's what led me to become a women empowerment coach. I know that women have so much power, but we're doing everything all the time. We're trying to do it all. And the problem is that we put ourselves last. And so as a women empowerment coach, I wanted to help empower women to put themselves first. My journey with HPP has been, though as messy and predictable as it has been, it has prepared me to deeply connect with these women. I help them turn their hot mess into a holy success because I consider myself a hot mess, and that's okay. I'm finally ready to own it. And that's the amazing thing is when you truly own who you are, that's when you take your power. So I recently also discovered that I have ADHD. I did not know this before. Thank you, perimenopause. Another blessing from perimenopause. My husband tried to tell me a few times, but it was always my husband and my kids that had ADHD, never me. However, these challenges, along with all of the different other challenges that we have at my house, if you were to come to my house, we have the most neuro-spicy house in the neighborhood. And don't get me started with the mental health journeys we have been on with our boys and still continue to navigate. That's why I can help those with their challenges, because I understand them and I've been through them. So with that, I went on a journey. You see, for a long time, I was that wife and mom that just did everything for everyone else. I put myself last. But what I didn't realize was I was hurting everyone around me in the process. Because when you put yourself last, you have nothing to give. So I discovered 10 tips, and I'm going to give one of them tonight, and the other 9 are, you can get them on that download over there. Just scan that QR code, and it's there. But the first one I want to give you is refill your cup. You can't fill from an empty cup. You can't. And when you put yourself first and you actually make yourself a priority and you do daily self-care, then you're a better mom, you're a better wife, you're a better business person, you're a better person because you have something to give. So now, I proudly own who I am. Perfectly imperfect. You don't have to have it all together to make a difference. You don't. You don't need to be perfect to find joy, peace, and purpose. Every struggle we face is an opportunity to grow into the people we were meant to be. Each time I face the impossible, which has been many, many times, every time I fall, I get back up. You can't keep me down. I've taken it and looked at it from a new angle. I turned that impossible into I'm possible. And I want you, the next time that you face your next challenge, to do the same. I want you to ask yourself and ask God, instead of why me, what is the lesson I need to learn here? Because every challenge we face is a stepping stone into who we are supposed to be, a refining fire that holds us into something, that molds us into something better, something greater, something stronger. As I stand on the stage, it all comes full circle. Because this is the very stage where my ignition point happened. So it was very ironic when I was able to connect Sean and April and find that my first time speaking on stage was going to be on the very stage where my ignition point happened. But I'm here to tell you that each of you has the strength to rise. No matter what you are facing, you have it within yourself, the strength to rise. One of the reasons I love coaching the most is because every single one of us have everything we need inside of us. It's just my job as a coach to help you unlock those puzzle pieces and find those pieces. Every single one of us are meant for greatness and have limitless potential. So I want you to turn the impossible into I'm possible. We all have our struggles. We all have our storms that we're going to face. Those things and challenges that almost seem impossible, but they're not. And I know deep in my heart that they are meant to refine us, to guide us into the people that we were meant to be. So tonight, let's embrace the messy. Let's embrace the hard. Let's embrace the beautiful and the grace that comes with every step of our journey. And let's turn those impossibles into I'm possible. Thank you.
I love it when we can take words like that and make something awesome out of them. I'm possible. And it's just a simple little thought, but it just changes your perspective so quickly. So one of the things that I have loved about getting to know Gina over the last several months is that we think a lot alike in certain ways. You know, she just said you all have those strengths and things that you go through. And I always say we all have a story. Every single one of you has a story. And guess what? Out of 8+ billion people on this planet, you are uniquely qualified to tell your story. No one else can do it. No one else can tell your story in your voice, in your way. And that is fantastic. Think about that for a moment. There's great power in that. The ability to take what you've experienced, to harness the lesson that was learned from that, good or bad. Sometimes we mess up and we learn the most from those mess ups, or we go through something very traumatic. And as we're going through it, we don't see the lesson. We don't see the other side. We don't see the sun on the other side of the clouds. But in retrospect, when we leave that experience and we have time between us and that experience, we can look back and say, oh, that's what I was supposed to learn from that experience. This is why I was placed on this path. This is my unique gift and ability. And through my own experiences, this is how I've come to produce this program, how I've come to create the practice that I have, where I get to work with amazing women just like these guys every day and help them learn just how amazing their stories are, just how awesome they are, and just how much they have to offer from their story simply by using their life experience. You don't have to use your imagination to write novels, but if you do, that's a great skill to have. But your life, you can't make this stuff up, right? Like, just live your life. That is your story. That is your novel. So again, this whole process, every time I have a speaker take the stage, that's when my fire just explodes. I love this. I love everything about it. The empowerment, the liberation that comes from sharing those things that we've been through. Everyone's been to a funeral once, right? Not the funnest thing ever. But when they take the casket out, is it one person or is it many? It's many. 6 to 8 people, right? I want you to think of your stories like that casket. If you carry that alone, it's heavy, and it can feel impossible to carry it alone. But when you get on a stage like this and you share that story, you share that load with 30 plus 20, however many other people, immediately that load becomes lighter, and you almost get to be reborn into this new, exhilarating, empowered version of yourself. And that's why we do this. So again, thank you for coming along on the ride with us tonight. We have one more speaker. Get your Kleenexes ready, because you might need them this time. This speaker, again, connected with me through Gina, who, again, master connector. If you need to know someone, go talk to the lady in the pink jacket. She knows all of them. She connected me with Elle, and the first words that Gina said when I was like, hey, I'm looking for speakers. You know, I'm so glad you're in. Do you know anybody? And she was like, you have to talk to my friend Elle. She is a warrior, and she needs to tell her story. And I was like, okay, send me your number. And she did. So again, I've been working with Elle since about June, I think, June, July, somewhere in that time frame. And at first she was like, I'm all in. And then she was like, I can't. She had some things and was like, I can't. A few weeks later, I was like, hey, we moved it to November. Are you in? And she was like, I don't know. And then she posted her story on Facebook. I was on vacation, and it didn't matter. I messaged her. Wait, let me back up. So does anybody read long Facebook posts anymore? Some people, a few of you, right? I am like ADHD brain. Thank you. Again, perimenopause, right? If it's longer than 4 sentences, I'm like, I'm out. I just keep going. Elle posted like a novel, right? And I was engrossed. I was like, oh my God, this is awesome. Not awesome in the fact that it was like an awesome story, but just the vulnerability that she was willing to share. So I'm on vacation and I'm scrolling Facebook at midnight, and I come to this post and I immediately text her. I'm like, I'm sorry it's so late. This is your story. Are you in? You need to share this from my stage. And she was like, you know what? Absolutely. So without further ado, please help me welcome Miss Elle Herson to the stage.
17 years ago, I made a promise to break free from the chains of the hell that had bound me. Today, I stand here, free and unchained, ready to share my story from victim to warrior with you, so that others may know that there is hope, that resilience is possible, and that no matter how dark life may get, we can rise up. Thank you for being here tonight. I'm grateful for this opportunity to be speaking with you all. I want to tell you all my story, not because it's easy to tell, but because it needs to be told. Domestic violence and abuse are issues we often talk about in hushed tones, buried underneath layers of stigma and shame. But I am here today to help strip away those layers, to be vulnerable and raw, so that others might understand that darkness can indeed be overcome, and that life after trauma can be one of strength and, yes, even joy. I was once trapped in a marriage that became, unfortunately, a living nightmare. It started, as these stories often do, with love and dreams of a happy life, a stable family, and a loving partner. But as the years went by, the loving facade faded, revealing a much, much darker reality. The man that I once thought would be my safe haven, my protector, turned into my prison warden, controlling everything I did, controlling everything I said. His words were sharp. His hands turned rough, and his anger was relentless. When I share this with people, I sometimes get asked, why didn't you just leave? And that is a simple question. Why didn't I just leave? But the answer isn't simple, especially to those who haven't experienced intimate partner abuse. Why didn't I just leave? Believe it or not, I tried. I tried several times. The domestic violence hotline states, leaving is not easy. On average, it takes a victim 7 times to try to leave before staying away for good. I was blessed that it only took 5. Exiting an abusive relationship can be unsafe for the victims. Leaving, and not only that, but when you're in it, you become conditioned. You become brainwashed. You believe that somehow, some way, you are responsible for that rage. That you can't escape this twisted version of love, and that this is all you deserve. And each time you try to leave, the fear, the uncertainty, the threats, the memories of past threats, they just keep pulling you in, sucking you down like a big, dark hole. I knew, however, that this had to be the last time. I had been on this ride for far too long, and I was exhausted. I just couldn't do it anymore. But there were 2 things that kept me going, 2 things that kept me hoping, 2 things that kept me planning amongst all the darkness. 2 things that eventually gave me the courage to break free. And that is my 2 amazing children. For them, I will be forever grateful. They have saved my life time and time again. At the time, they were so small, so full of innocence, so impressionable, and so incredibly observant, yet they were so vividly unaware of the daily hell that we were living in. I knew I had to protect them, to save them from growing up thinking that this is what love was. I didn't want my children growing up that way. So I had been meticulously planning and preparing for these exact days for weeks. About a week before my full plan was put into action, I began organizing the garage. I couldn't do the inside of the house yet because he would know. So I started organizing the garage. And how I would do this is I would start packing my things into boxes on the right side of the garage without labeling them. And then I would go to the left side and put his things in boxes on the left side of the garage without labeling them. And in the center, I still had the boxes that needed to be sorted through. When he asked me why I wasn't at work and what I was doing, I said I simply needed to use some accrued time off that I had or I was going to lose it, so I decided that I would organize the garage. He said, well, it's about time you did something useful. And he left it at that and went back inside. The night before, my plan was to be executed finally arrived. And let me tell you that this was the longest, most terrifying night of my life. I knew that by sunrise, I'd have to execute this plan that I had been crafting and preparing. And as I laid there in bed that night, my heart was pounding, thump, 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 out of my chest, just rapidly beating, while I was pretending to sleep next to this man. Every fiber of my being screamed inside of me. I had fear and doubt and questions running through my head instead of sleep. Would he get up and go to work in the morning? Would my plan be successful? Would I really be able to get out for good? And would my children and I be safe? Were a few of those questions that ran through my head. You see, earlier that evening, I wasn't so sure that he was even going to get up and go to work in the morning. And if he didn't go to work in the morning, that meant this plan that I had put so much work into wouldn't happen. And I wouldn't be able to get my children and I out. Earlier that evening is when it happened in our relationship for the very last time. He came home from work and he cracked open a 24-ounce beer. Now, to put that into perspective, one soda can is 12 ounces. 2 of those together, and he drank 10 to 12 24-ounce beers a night. This wasn't unusual for him. The kids were playing in his truck while I was trying to finalize the things in the garage so that the garage was completely done the next day. I blended in with the neighborhood. We lived in southern Utah in the red mountains of the desert, and it was mid-August afternoon. So there were several neighbors that were outside in their garages, cleaning, preparing their yards, getting kids ready for school, and doing the last-minute summer touch-ups. The kids were playing in the back of the truck. They were 2 and 4. Suddenly, he entered the garage where I was. I could sense his rage. I could see it on his face. He goes over to the right side of the garage, starts ripping open boxes and tearing everything out. Runs to the left side of the garage, starts ripping open boxes, tearing items out. My panic started to surge. I could sense that he was angry. Without speaking, he continued this cycle over and over again for a few minutes. Finally, he stopped and he screamed as loud as he could. "Are you leaving me? I know you're leaving. I'm not stupid." Instantly, I grabbed the cordless phone that was sitting nearby, preparing to call for help. And as soon as I grabbed it, he ripped it out of my hands and hurled it past my head, shattering it against the wall. Instantly, the kids stopped doing what they were doing and they froze in terror. I wondered what was going through their poor little minds. And then in a blur of violence, it happened. He punched my shoulder, he threw me against the wall, and he started to choke me. I prayed silently, hoping that any one of the neighbors would intervene. They were all watching, but nobody did, because it's none of their business, right? Why get involved? When he finally stopped, he went back inside, probably to crack open another beer. And I sat down to calm the kids who were now screaming and crying in terror. I hid the bruises so that were already forming. I could feel them forming. And I pulled the cell phone out of that lovely little lady pocket we all have in our shirts. And I decided to call my mom and my brother to come over and pick me and my children up. I didn't tell them what had happened, but I know that they could sense the severity of the issue because they arrived very quickly. When they pulled up to the house, he was instantly angered. But he was terrified of my brother, which gave me some comfort, so he didn't proceed to stop me. They urged me to stay at their house that night. However, I knew that if I didn't return back to the house that I called a home, that my plan would not be successful. As I went back into that house that was supposed to be our home that night, I put on one hell of an Oscar award-winning performance. I mean, come on, Lifetime Movie Network here I am, full script and all. You don't even have to write it. I'm the full package girl. I come full deal, just videotape it. I put on one hell of a performance. I played my part, apologizing to him, telling him that me and the children were not going anywhere, making him believe it, so much so that I even endured sleeping with him intimately one last time, leaving me feeling filthy and unwanted, but knowing that it was absolutely necessary. As he passed out that night, I laid awake, waiting for the morning and my chance to finally escape. Beep, beep, beep. At 5:30 in the morning, the alarm screamed at me to jump out of bed. It jolted my insides immediately into action. Breathe, just breathe, I kept telling myself. I had to keep my cool, pretending that it was any other morning, that it was normal. I had to fight the panic that surged within me. I knew that I had this one last chance and that I couldn't waste a single second. By 6 a.m., I heard the door shut behind him. And as I heard his loud truck roar up and leave the driveway, I instantly jumped out of bed and sprang into action. I started packing as much as I could before the kids woke up. Because let's be honest, with a 2- and 4-year-old, you're not going to get much done once they're awake. Luckily, they were going to a friend's house for the day, but I started packing as much as I could before they woke up, grabbing the essentials and preparing them for the day that they had no idea would change our lives forever. I only had until 6 p.m. that night. He was working a 12-hour shift that day, and when he returned, I had to be gone. After a long day of packing with the help of my mom and a few good friends, I managed to move out just in the nick of time. A friend of mine that was a really good friend and knew this plan, she worked at the same place he did. And when he left for work that day, she called me and said he's on his way home. That gave me the cue that I had exactly 15 minutes to get out of the house. I knew it was exactly 15 minutes because part of my preparation for this day was driving to and from his work on multiple different routes, any route that you could take to and from his work to our house. And the quickest, fastest route was exactly 15 minutes. I quickly threw the remaining kids' items out the top window, below the garage, to my friend who caught these items, threw them in our truck, heaping full of our belongings. And then, as I could hear his truck on the street behind us, I ran downstairs, jumped in the truck, and drove to a nearby cul-de-sac and hid. When he reached the house, another friend called me to tell me that he was inside and that it was safe to proceed my drive to my parents' house. So I went to my parents' house. Of course, moments later, my phone starts ringing off the hook, and I knew exactly who it was. I wasn't going to answer the phone, however. because I knew what he was calling about. And I knew that in just a few moments, he was going to be served with divorce papers and a restraining order, which was also part of my plan. And frankly, I didn't want to deal with his abuse anymore. I hadn't managed to pack all my things because all day long I had focused on essentials, the kids' stuff, and any important heirlooms or documents that were needed. So my belongings were left for last. As women, moms, we often do that. We worry about everybody else first. So I knew that I needed my clothing that was all at the house and all of my self-care items that were at the house. I waited for my brother to get home from work, and I asked him if he would accompany me to go over to the house to retrieve these items. We called a police escort to meet us over there because I knew he was going to be outraged. When we arrived, he was already waiting on the front lawn. 2 hours later, already drunk. And he was holding a gun that I didn't know he owned. I'm sure I'm the only one who could see it because he was holding it in such a way that just intimidated me. I knew you would be back, he sneered between his gritted teeth, and it sent an instant chill down my spine. Just as soon as he said that, the police officer pulled up, and he tucked the gun in his back pocket. I don't know if the police officer ever saw the gun. He never addressed it. But I know that if that officer wouldn't have been there that day, things would have ended up very differently for me and my children. I know without a shadow of a doubt that leaving was the best thing I ever did. But that day, I knew that that had to be the final time. I wouldn't have any more opportunities. For my safety, and more importantly, for my children's safety, I had to be done. That was the only time I called the police in all of our 5 years that we were physically married in the same home. I wish I had done it after every single act of abuse, but his threats to take away my children, his threats to hurt my family, his threats of what he would do to me if I did, kept me silent. Now I wish like hell that I would have called the police after every single incident. Looking back, I know now that I wasn't just packing our things that day. I was packing away my fears. I was packing away my doubts, and I was packing away my shame. I was preparing to leave behind not just a house, but a chapter of my life that was defined by pain and trauma. This wasn't simply about escape. It was the start of reclaiming my life. That day, as I left and as I closed the door for the last time, I felt a mixture of fear and exhilaration, while the questions from the night before started racing through my mind again. Was I really free? Would he really come after me? And would he make good on his threats? Questions that tormented me for years. But the small flicker of hope, the chance at a better life for me and my children, and the possibility of safety and freedom is what pushed me forward. In the days that followed, I struggled. I struggled a lot. The trauma didn't end the moment I closed that door. I carried it with me. I carried every bruise, every word, every moment of shame haunted me. I believed that what had happened to me was my fault. That if only I had been just a little quieter or a little more obedient or a little more perfect, maybe he wouldn't have been so aggressive. This thinking ate away at me. It did for a long time. I was plagued by guilt, by memories that felt as raw as the day that they had happened. But as the years passed, I did begin to understand that none of this was my fault. Through the support of loved ones, friends, and eventually a very compassionate therapist, I learned to see myself differently. I began to forgive myself for the things that I couldn't control. And slowly, very slowly, I started to forgive him too. Not because he deserved it. Let me be clear, not because he deserved it, but because I did. Carrying hate, carrying anger, it's a huge burden for anybody to carry. And I had carried it for too long. I realized that forgiveness was not a gift for him. It was liberation for me. After years of living in darkness, it was time to rediscover who I was. This was perhaps the most difficult part of my journey, believe it or not. Not only did I spend so long living in others' expectations, my family's, society's, my abusers, that I barely recognized myself. I had gained during this dark period of time over 200 pounds, weighing in at my heaviest at 399 pounds. I was unhappy with who I was and what I had become. I had to learn to listen to my own voice, not that negative little nagging voice that tells you all those mean, nasty little things, but I had to learn to listen to that voice inside of me that loves me. I had to learn to trust my own instincts again. And more importantly, I had to learn to love myself again. I also had to confront my past. It's a past filled with memories that sometimes were difficult to relive. Growing up, I was surrounded by relationships that had their own struggles, wrestling with the kind of love that sometimes felt more like a duty than a joy. Relationships that have lasted and today are strong and loving, but they were models at the time of what I didn't want. These relationships have helped me realize that I had to create a new legacy for me and my children. I knew I had to break generational chains to teach my children that love isn't about control or power. It's about mutual respect, compassion, and freedom. As I built my new life, I found something that I never expected I would find during this journey: gratitude. I became grateful for the strength that I never even knew I had deep within me. I became grateful for the people who supported me along the way, who believed in me even when I couldn't believe in myself. I began to realize that in some strange way, all those scars made me stronger. I am who I am today, not in spite of those experiences, but because of them. One of the most powerful lessons I've learned in this journey of rediscovering myself is that forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't mean condoning what happened or pretending that it wasn't real. Forgiveness for me was about acceptance. I had to accept that the past couldn't be changed, but that the future could. Part of that acceptance was learning to forgive those that are close to me, those who have hurt me, and most importantly, myself. I had to learn to forgive myself. Those close relationships I experienced growing up, like so many others, did the best they could with what they knew how. I was loved growing up, very loved growing up. But these relationships had their own struggles. And I came to realize that holding on to resentment for the struggles that they had wouldn't serve me any purpose. Letting go of anger and hurt freed me. It freed me to move forward. It freed me to create the kind of life and family that I wanted. And today I can't imagine a life without these relationships and the role models that they have been for me in my adult years. Accepting myself was harder. For years, I believed I was broken, unworthy of love and unworthy of happiness. But as I healed, I began to see that my worth isn't determined by my past or by what anybody else thinks of me. I have worth simply because I exist. And I have the power to shape and create my own life, to create my own happiness. Today, I no longer see myself as a victim. I am a warrior. I have fought battles that most people will never understand, and I survived them. I endured heavy trauma therapy, which anybody who's done that knows that it is not fun at all. I had weight loss and skin removal surgery to help get rid of all the trauma that I was carrying. And I am here to tell you that no matter how dark life gets, there is always light on the other side. I've always told my children when they were little and growing up through their teenage years, when they're having bad days, that the sun is always shining even behind the gray clouds. And that is a motto that I still live by today. In reclaiming my life, I took time to learn what safe and loving touch was. And I enjoy helping others learn the same thing. I did this by fulfilling a dream that I had carried for 18 years, by putting myself through massage therapy school and becoming a licensed massage therapist and energy worker. To this day, I help people heal from the inside out, whether that's through the gift of physical touch of massage therapy, through aligning chakras, or by the gift of energy healing. I've also made it my mission to help others find their own strength, to learn to love themselves, because everybody is worthy of love. My journey has taught me that we don't have to be defined by our trauma. We can rise above it. We can heal and we can thrive. If you're listening to this today, here in person or virtually, and you're struggling, I want you to know that you are not alone. There's a community of people who understand, who want to help, and who will stand with you and fight with you as you reclaim your life. Let me circle back to where I began. 17 years ago, I made a promise to myself to break free. And today, I am still free. I am free from the chains of abuse, from the shadows of my past, and from the voices that once told me I was not good enough. I am free to live. I am free to love. And I am free to be unapologetically me. My journey from victim to warrior has not been an easy one. It took strength, courage, and the willingness to keep fighting, physically, mentally, and emotionally fighting, even when I wanted to give up. But today I stand here not as a survivor, but as someone who has reclaimed her life. To those of you who are going through your own struggles, please know this. You are worth fighting for. You are worth every bit of love, every ounce of respect, and every single chance at happiness. You are not defined by what has happened to you. You are defined by what you do next. So choose to fight, choose to live, and choose to rise up. Thank you.
Awesome. Please sign up for these ladies' lists, their offers, their products, support them. Even if you aren't one to want to participate, you probably know someone that could benefit from what they're offering. And to keep with that spirit, I also have a couple of announcements. So I'm going to save the big one for the last because it is the very most exciting. And my offer over on the table, I also wrote a book this year with my lovely friend in the back, Dawn Renee, who's been taking our photography tonight. We participated in a 14-author anthology called Taking the Leap, From Employee to Executive. It's all about women who have taken the leap, a leap of faith, believed in themselves, started a business, left corporate, which I just did in March, and this is my full-time gig now. And it's great because not only does it talk about our decisions to leave the corporate world, we take you on a journey through our own struggles and what we've learned. And if you pick up a copy of my book, I will sign it for you. Dawn Renee will also sign it for you. But you can read our stories and you can see just a little bit about how I got here, doing what I'm doing, some of the struggles that I've gone through and the things that I've endured. That's number one. Number two, I also have a course because we're coaches and that's what we do is we build things that help people learn. My course, Start Your Story in 7 Days, is 50% off right now. And as you might tell by the title, it's how to start your story in 7 days. And it's similar to the process I took these ladies through, but it is more self-paced. You'll get 7 days worth of training. Most of the video is a countdown clock that will allow you to dive into your free writing. I'm very big on free writing. Ask these ladies every day, have you done your writing today? How's your writing coming? What did you write today? What's coming up for you? I'm very big on that because that's how we excavate those stories. So that is on sale for 50% off. And now for the big announcement. I need a drum roll. Can somebody? Good enough. All right. The big announcement is, besides the fact that the Confidence Catalyst has just expanded into its second city in Utah, we are also growing into San Diego. We're growing into Dallas, Texas. And next year in September, our very first Confidence Catalyst on the Caribbean 8-day cruise. We're so excited. The fabulous Kelly Walker over here is helping facilitate that. We will have all of the amazing things that come with a cruise. You get your ports of call, you get all-included meals, all of those great things. And on the sea days, you get some speaking workshops. And you get to do what they've done right here tonight. Shorter because there's a lot more speakers, but you will also get an international speaker certificate because you will be speaking on international waters. And that is something else you can add to your tagline. So if you're interested in any of these offers, I have a sign-up sheet. All the ladies have sign-up sheets. We all have our QR codes. Please sign up. We would love to stay in touch with you. A couple items of business. We will send out a follow-up email to everyone, our virtual audience included. Please let us know your thoughts. You'll get the links for all of their opt-ins and whatnot as well. You can go and sign up for who you want to sign up that way. Follow them on social media. Let us know what you thought of the event if you're interested in speaking on this stage next year. I plan to come back in June. There is a blurb, if you will, everything about what we do here on our website and an application for you if you're interested. It's not a commitment, it's a, hey, I'm interested, I want to learn more. So if you are interested, then you can go ahead and click that. Did I forget anything, ladies? Did I? I think I might have.
That book was a bestseller.
Oh yeah.
The first hour, 24 hours,
First day.
right? First
Yes.
day.
Yes, our
She
book.
forgets to-
I forget that part, right? It's still weird to say that I'm a published author, right? Jen, you can relate to that, right? Have any of you guys written books? Okay, that's your next step, so we'll chat because I have a process for you. But yes, it was a bestseller on Amazon within the first 24 hours. So it's just very exciting and it's opened a lot of doors for us. So again, thank you so much for joining us. I know it's been a long night. Hopefully you felt inspired. You felt empathy. Maybe you felt a little stirring inside yourself to say, hey, I've been through that. Wow, I'm not alone. I relate to that. I need to talk to that person. For our online audience, thank you so much for sitting behind your computers for a few hours and hanging out with us tonight. We will let you guys go. We have about 30 minutes to network. Please come up and introduce yourselves. Ladies, don't go anywhere. We're going to take a picture. But after that, eat the rest of the food. There's not that much left. And come and mix and mingle. Thank you so much for joining us for the first ever Utah Confidence Catalyst. We will be back in June.